United States border security, because in recent years they've come under certain they've come under certain scrutiny for several reasons. So today we'll be discussing certain areas along the U.S.-Mexican border. We'll be talking about immigrants, immigration, and the general population's views on these two things. We'll also be discussing the border security's use of force. But first things first, we'll be talking about the border security's use of specific tactics and strategies.
So, the main purpose of the Border Patrol officers is to secure our international and coastal waters between ports of entry, whether this is between Canada and the U.S. or Mexico and the U.S. And their job is to protect citizens from terrorists, drug smugglers, and illegal immigrants, along with keeping out illegal contraband as well, such as food, weapons, drugs, money. To keep this intact, there's 15 unique units in the American system. Example of these is K-9 unit, Horse Patrol, patrol boats, TAC unit, or known as BORTAC, Border Patrol Search, Trauma, and Rescue, which is more or less on the Mexican border, known as BORSTAR. K-9 unit is basically used to detect large amount of drugs or guns or even cash, depending on how much there is. And BORSTAR, that usually is not just involved on the border, it's also involved with the community. It'll help out, such as El Paso or places close to the border. They'll help out the community police and even go in for search and rescues to help missing people and whatnot. The video we're about to show you will show what the everyday Border Patrol officer experiences.
They granted it. The Rio Grande Valley sector accounts for about 40% of the apprehensions in the United States. McAllen Station specifically is about 20% of the entire nation. We catch about 300 individuals a day just in this 50-mile span. They first took me on a boat. Just drove up and down the Rio Grande. They're looking for crossers. Most people will cross on rafts or boats. There's kind of some deflated rafts on the side of the coast there. That's for people crossing over. We would get off periodically and just kind of take little trails and walk around. A lot of times they would look for tracks and see some faint ones, like, okay, we know someone passed through here, a couple days ago or a day ago or something like that. Their main job is obviously to keep the border safe and to apprehend people who are crossing illegally. But also, as they told me, it's a humanitarian mission as well, whether it's Mexicans or Americans or any other citizen of the world, who's passing through, they want to try to keep those people safe. That's kind of one of the difficulties of the job, is you have to switch on and off from humanitarian mission to, is this guy trying to take your life? Border Patrol agents are killed, are shot at, they find dead bodies a lot, they witness a lot of trauma. One agent who operates mostly on the boats, he said that sometimes they'll find a raft or a little boat trying to get across, and they'll be packed with 10 or more people or something like that. Sometimes they'll just throw a kid off into the water just because they know that the agents will go for the kid right away to save them. We went up and down along the river there for a while. We ran into a lot of sugar cane. It's very dense, and they were talking about the difficulties of tracking people through that, how a lot of times people can just run into that and they'll just never find them, even if they have dogs. You cordon off this field and try to surround it. Even
So, they were talking about Rio Grande sector. Another one worth mentioning is Tucson, Arizona border. From 2000 to present, this is the most active border when it comes to illegal immigration. With that comes the highest death toll among any U.S.-Mexican border. In 2010, out of the 365 deaths on U.S.-Mexican border, 225 of them occurred in Tucson. With these deaths, 43% of apprehensions of the Southwest also happened here.
So an explanation for these numbers being so high is because of a policy that was instituted in the 90s by the U.S. Customs and Border Security called Prevention Through Deterrence. In an article called Zero Protection, How U.S. Border Enforcement Harms Migrant Safety and Health by Catherine Hampton, posted in Physicians for Human Rights. This policy essentially allowed for the militarization of high population areas. And as a result of this forced immigrants to cross illegally in much more dangerous areas. It didn't actually stop them from crossing, it just caused them to start crossing in more dangerous areas, causing for these numbers to become so high, why so many people die. So, in another article called Securing the U.S.-Mexico Border, an Ongoing Dilemma in Homeland Security Affairs by Katrina Ordonez, she cites a formula called the ASB model, and this model predicts where immigrants will cross in the Tucson border area based on the number of Border Patrol officers in a given area. So we know immigration is happening, but what we also want to know is what is the general public's views of immigrants and immigration in general. A survey done by the Pew Research Center in an article titled Shifting Public Views on Legal Immigration into the U.S., it suggests that, if you can see in this picture, since the year 2001, the general U.S. populace has become more welcoming of immigration. Now, the degree of change in welcoming of legal immigration varies drastically between Democratic and Republican political parties, with Democrats being much more accepting of immigration. However, even though U.S. citizens are more welcoming, the majority of U.S. citizens have the wrong idea about the legality of most immigrants. So in that same article, it stated that 76% of immigrants in the U.S. are here legally. However, only 45% of Americans agree that the majority of immigrants are here legally. A total of 54% said that immigrants are either here illegally, are split between 50-50, legal and illegal, or just flat out don't know. So we have another video helping explain this.
As Congress and the President continue to clash over border security strategy, we asked Maria Villarreal to give us a reality check on exactly what is going on at the border.
These images of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border are exactly the ammo President Trump has used to declare a national crisis. But a closer look at the actual data from the government's own figures paints a different picture. In 2018, nearly 400,000 people were apprehended by Border Patrol at the southern border. That's a 76% decrease from the record 1.6 million back in 2000. And contrary to the president's statements, the number of undocumented immigrants in the U.S. is at its lowest since 2004.
We have tremendous amounts of drugs flowing into our country, much of it coming from the southern border. When you look and when you listen to politicians, particular certain Democrats, they say it all comes through the Port of Entry. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's just a lie.
And according to Customs and Border Protection, a vast majority of drug seizures at the Mexico border actually do happen at legal crossing points. What has changed is the dramatic increase in the number of families attempting to cross into the U.S., up by 42% in the last year alone, according to Customs and Border Patrol. El Paso Mayor DeMargo, a Republican just like the president, says a wall is not a solution.
We are a sovereign nation. We need to protect our borders. It won't all be physical barriers. They help channel things. It will be technology. It will be the manpower.
Mireya Villarreal, CBS News, Dallas.
So seeing as Matt here is also technically a legal immigrant, he can tell you his personal experience with the border security.
So I was actually coming home from Christmas back from Canada, and me and my buddy were driving across the border, and the officer came out and said, okay, we know you're hiding something, take it, whatever's out of your car. And he took my buddy out of the car, brought him to the trunk, he's like, show me whatever legal contraband you have in this car. So after we obviously didn't have anything with us, and he's like, okay, fine, if you're not gonna give it to us, we're gonna go through secondary. Like, okay, sure. So he brought us a secondary. At that point, they went through our car twice. The first guys looked at it for maybe 5 minutes, not even, and said there was nothing there. And then they had a group of about 10 guys go to like a little mini coupe and go through it all again. And during that time, we were inside getting questioned again because they still thought we had drugs on us. And then they brought us into a small room with these two, I would say, middle-aged guys from Ohio. And they were clearly under the influence of drugs, and they had been caught carrying drugs over the border. And I guess they thought we were involved with them or something like that. So they brought in the detector dogs, the canine unit, and sniffed all of us. And then after that, we were let go. Then we still had to wait for another 30 minutes just to get processed again. So this whole process took about 2 hours, and they found like nothing. And at the end of that, they forgot to give my buddy his car key back, and it was like one of the push start ones. So we got like halfway to Adrian, we pulled over at a gas station, and we couldn't move anywhere. We didn't have the key anymore. So I'm not sure if any of you guys know, but I want to be a border patrol officer, and that like was like that. I've never had any like type of interaction with one of those guys before like that.
Yeah, so even though Matt was legally apprehended, his story is in the minority with people crossing the border. As you heard in the video, U.S. Customs and Border Security, they suggest that apprehension numbers are down significantly over the past couple of decades. In an article published by Pew Research Center by John Granlich just this past January, he stated that in 2018, a total of 467,000 apprehensions were made this past year. Now, compared that to the 90s and 2000s, where numbers were routinely well over 1 million. So, even though it sounds like a lot, it is down significantly. According to an article in the AP News by Colleen Long titled "Border Agents Face Split-Second Decisions on Use of Force," one reason for this is because of an audit that was done in 2013 that looked at how border security went about their business and enforced the laws. So if you can see in this little graphic, the use of lethal force in the past several years has gone down significantly. It's partly because of that audit. Long also states that other reasons for use of lethal force being down are simply because of more options of less than lethal force being available to officers, along with better training. So at this point, we'll open it for discussion. So we'll start with, despite recent numbers suggesting that border security has actually gotten better in terms of humanitarian, I guess, why is it such a big issue recently?
I think like Donald Trump's Build the Wall movement has really like kept interest in like the border patrol, like it's really like kept it alive, like it's kept the talk alive.
I'm gonna agree with her. I think it's a good political pull, and it invests a lot of people in your movement, even if they don't know what's going on. If it sounds right for the American people, they're gonna go for it.
Could you restate the question?
All right, so despite numbers that we were kind of like throwing out there, suggest that border security has actually gotten better and less,
There's less
intrusive.
illegal immigrants coming over. There's less arrests too.
But in recent years, it's been it's been all over the news. Is there any explanation as to that?
Like why, even though it's getting better, why is it still all over the news?
Why
Like
is
it's
it?
just as bad.
Why does it feel like it's a bigger issue than it?
I think because, I think it's always been, no, I wouldn't say an issue necessarily, but I always think that there's always gonna be people trying to get into this country illegally, because they'd rather face the risk of getting caught here than living where they are. And I think that just, like the people that we have in charge, like Trump, makes it a big deal, because like that's something that he could hold high and say, we're gonna solve this problem, even if he never does. Like building a wall is just something that he could have to get reelected. And I think like it's always gonna be a problem. Like you could build the wall, they're gonna find a way to get into the country no matter what. And I think it's always just been a problem. And yeah.
Yeah, and I remember like when I was younger too, like I feel like the stigma against like immigrants was so much worse like when I was like growing up than it is now. Like in my opinion, I don't know, I feel like a lot of people are more accepting now than they were a couple years ago, and maybe it's just because I'm like living in a different area than I was. I live in a very like rural area, but like I just feel like the attitude and like immigrants are like used as like a scapegoat. Like they're taking our jobs, they're doing this, like they're doing that, and it's like, but they're taking a lot of times they're taking the jobs that like if you asked like a white man if he wants to work that job, he'd say hell no.
Mm.
Like
Yeah,
Who could weigh in?
I didn't know.
Because it's a dialogue, so you can.
Yeah,
They're saying.
That guy, she kind of answered my question I was gonna ask, but why do you think the Tucson border is so popular for illegal immigrants coming and going through there?
Sorry, what was that?
Well, why is like the Tucson border so
Oh.
popular, or like one of the heaviest for immigrants coming through there?
Didn't you say it's one of the most dangerous?
It is one of the most dangerous too to
A
go
lot,
through.
yeah, a lot of people, a lot of immigrants die trying to cross over that border, but it's like literally just because, not because of border patrol just being violent there, it's just because it's just dangerous.
Terrain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
things like that.
It's very hilly, like dry.
It's the whole risk reward thing to them.
Yeah.
Like they would rather take the most dangerous path if they meant that they're gonna get through.
Yeah.
Like why try and go where there's a lot of border patrol?
They also said in one of the articles, I didn't mention it, but it was like, I think it was within a 50-mile radius, like that's where almost all the entrances came in for that border, which was kind of crazy.
Oh, so they have a lot more legal options there? Is that the?
Well, it's just like there's a lot less border officers there.
Oh,
So like, from what we got, it was like, they're trying to figure out where's the easiest place.
Even though they're more
so it's
likely
like
to die.
dangerous.
Yeah, even though
Yeah.
they're more likely to die, literally just like walking across the land,
Yeah.
like they're more likely to get across.
That's crazy.
It's because the border patrol's not gonna patrol something that's so dangerous to get across, like.
Yeah, that was a big reason of the prevention through deterrence policy that they instituted. There's a lot of border patrol in areas where it's like immigrants are likely to cross just because like it's easy to go across. Yeah, it's like there are actual roads and stuff like that, but they purposely leave dangerous places like kind of alone. So if immigrants are so bent on getting across, they can just risk their lives doing it. Does anybody have any suggestions to improve border security or make it easier for immigrants to get across legally? Any ideas? This is a pretty open-ended question.
I think, I know my grandparents came legally and like they had to take the citizenship test, and I just think like everyone's trying to make it harder to get citizenship here, and like I don't think that should be a thing. Because I know if most of us were to take a citizenship test, some of us wouldn't pass, and my grandma would pass with flying colors, and like that's
I'm
not okay.
No, I was saying like my grandma took that test too, and she said like it was so hard. I mean, she came from Germany, but like she said like that test is like crazy insane.
Yeah, because we had to do that too in Canada because we had a big blow with people from Iraq and Afghanistan coming in. Because our prime minister is so nice and he lets everybody come in. And like the town I was living in last year, there were a family of I believe 10 or 15, and they just let them they didn't have as much testing come in. They just basically let them in and gave them a place to live. Some people were upset about it, which I can understand, but like we're kind of saving them from going through more war-torn areas to come to a place. Like they haven't committed any crimes, so I don't understand why everybody's freaking out.
It's crazy when you like go on the Ambassador Bridge and you go into Canada and you're driving in. Like I've done it a lot because I'd be rowing in Canada, and they would stop us and like, oh, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm rowing, and they're like, okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
And then I'd be coming back and I'm like, oh, I was at a regatta in Canada, and I would stop for like 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I had my problem with too. Like the last time I was going home for Christmas, the border officer actually asked us like, okay, what are you guys taking? And he's like, so what do you guys want to do like when you're done school? I told him, he's like, so he gave me a reference letter, which is pretty neat. Yeah. He was only like 25, 26, and he's like, if you have any questions or anything, here's like my email. I was like,
We need more people like that here. What are you talking about? Like,
on the way home, I get stopped. And
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Did you run across anything that differentiates strongly between illegal immigration and seeking asylum?
there was,
We were more looking looking at like, we really try to look at the points that we brought up, but,
Most of the people I remember, like, in the video, they even said, like, they weren't just coming over just to come over, they were coming over to get away from the problems that they were facing in Mexico. Because I remember also in one of the articles we were reading, I believe it was,
There's some parts.
where was it? Enemy Terrain article from Mr. Ewing, and I believe he was saying, like, they mostly come over to get away, and like that, the reason, like, the drug smugglers now are taking over the people because they've found there's so much money in it, because people will pay like everything they have, give like them everything just to get back, like, get over to the US.
It is, when you think about it, it's not even mostly, I would say Mexico's pretty bad when it comes to cartels, but like Colombia, like Venezuela, like most Southern American countries are just controlled all by cartels, and like I know a lot of people there move right up, and then once you get towards the Mexican border, it's just all cartels, and they're just gonna control all your movement through, so they just kind of ruin it for everybody. And like the people that do seek asylum are trapped in a system that they are never gonna find asylum.
And there's another thing too, like the cartel is actually like taking over, making sure they were getting all the people trying to get over, and they made them go through the rougher terrain, because most of them would end up dying, so they would get more money from that, I guess. I'm not sure how it worked, but.
And like in the video, they talked about how like they would throw kids, because obviously the
Yeah.
officer's gonna go for the kids, and the kids have no idea what they're doing. They're just trying to find a better place to live. And like most of the time, the kids don't even have their parents.
No.
Like the parents just send them and say, you have to get there for yourself. And it sucks, because most of the adults, like, yeah, there's some adults looking for a better place to live, but there's like the few that are women for the bunch, and
Yeah.
like that's not very fun.
It's just kind of crazy though to think too, because like they always talk about how big the problem with the Mexican and US border is, but the bridge, I think it's called the Ambassador Bridge from going to Windsor, that's one of the highest places for drug smuggling in North America, and they don't make as big of a deal out of it as of the other one, but like I think it's because that one, I'm not too sure, but I think it's because that makes more money for the government, but I don't know, that's my opinion on that, but.
Honestly, like, there's such a low, like, border patrol, like, there's such a low population of them in Michigan, like, along that border. If I wanted to row across the lake, or across a river, I could, and I could just walk into Canada, and no one would even question me.
No.
And it's like, it's such a short distance, like, it was
Yeah, because I was living in Toronto for a bit, and you could, on a clear day over the water, you could see right to Buffalo. So it's kind of crazy just to think how close we actually
Yeah,
are.
like in Detroit, of course, you can go straight across the.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy. Although, not as easy as it once was. You really used to need a passport.
No, well, that's what we found out too, like, this one article we were reading, it was before 9/11, like, you just needed a piece of ID, and then, like, now, like, as soon as, like, 9/11 occurred, like, we had a chart, and we saw a chart, and it's like, the amount of money spent on border patrol, it was, like, down low, and as soon as 9/11 hit, it was just skyrocketing.